Welcome, Comadres and friends. I'm Dr. Nora de Hoyos Comstock, national and international founder of Las Comadres para las Américas. The leadership team and I are pleased to have you join us for tonight's teleconference, as we have just celebrated our book club's quinceañera. It's been our privilege to support Latino authors throughout these many years, and we look forward to the next 15. But we are celebrating our sweet 16, so don't forget about that one. Would also like to extend a warm welcome to readers following us on our live Twitter chat at Read Latino Lit. And tonight, please help us welcome authors Yasmin, Ramirez, and Yamile, Saied, Mendez. Their interviews will begin shortly, and I apologize for stumbling on your name, Yamile. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. Keep yourselves on mute. You can keep your videos on. We suggest you put yourself on speaker mode, but gallery works just as well. Speaker just makes the person speaking big. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat and we'll try to get to them. But first, let's start with our book club's history. Comadre Tess?
Oh, hola, I am Tess Tobin, the project manager of the Los Comadres and Friends Book Club. Our first book club gathering was in July 2004 in New York in Comadre Maria Ferrer's apartment. After a brief hiatus, Nora Comstock re-envisioned and relaunched the book club nationwide to promote the work of Latino authors to every book lover, to bring our community to bookstores, and to support our Latino writers. We started our teleconferences in October of 2007. This year, we are celebrating our Sweet 16 and are delighted to be sharing works by Latino authors with all of you. We created the teleconferences and book club to entice everyone to read more Latino authors and to learn about Latino roots and the different perspectives on Latino culture and heritage. Our book club and Zoom teleconferences are open to all, not just Latinos. We are creating a space for everyone to explore the Latino writer's mind and soul as portrayed through the written word. We encourage you to join our local book clubs in your city or time zone. We have clubs in 12 cities that are meeting virtually. There is sure to be one that can fit your schedule. If your city doesn't have one, why not help us start one? For more information about our book club, visit our website at latinolit.com. So please invite others to join us. Comadre Karen, take it away.
Welcome, Comadres and friends, to our February 2023 Zoom teleconference. I'm Karen Gonzalez, Assistant Coordinator for the Las Comadres and Friends Book Club, Denver Comadres Book Club Facilitator and co-founder of the Colorado Alliance of Latino Mentors and Authors. Thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight, we begin our interviews with Yasmin Ramirez, talking about her memoir, ANDALE, PRIETA, a love letter to my family. Yasmin is a 2021 Martha's Institute of Creative Writing Author Fellow, as well as a 2020 recipient of the Woody and Gail Hunt Aspen Institute Fellowship Award. She is an assistant professor of English, creative writing, and Chicanx literature at El Paso Community College. She stays active in the Borderplex arts community and serves on the advisory board of Border Senses, a literary nonprofit. Andale Prieta is her first novel. Interviewing her is Comadre Sheila Perez Quindo. Comadre Sheila is a Chicana of indigenous Mexican and Chinese ancestry. She is an aspiring writer, born into a large family and raised in Denver, Colorado. She is a former pediatric animal assisted and recreational therapist working for 33 years in a large safety net hospital. During the last several years of this tenure at Denver Health, she was fortunate to have introduced Nika, the pioneer four-legged canine, to patients and families throughout the hospital. We're dealing with a variety of traumatic issues. She is married, has 2 children, 2 grandchildren, 2 dogs, and 5 fish. She is a member of the Mile High Veterans and the Auraria Historical Advocacy Council, both of which provide educational scholarships to community youth. Comadre Sheila, take it away.
Thanks, Karen. Thank you so much. Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here today. Bravo, Yasmin, for your memoir. The book has so many poignant points. It had us laughing and crying, and everyone in our book club enjoyed it. We had a lively conversation as it was so full of wonderful memories. We even felt the anguish that you shared due to the death of Ita, your grandmother. And the music selections also added to the story. Please tell us about how your life has changed for you since the release of the memoir.
Well, first, thank you for having me. Thank you for this conversation. The major way that my life has changed is I'm doing really cool things like this, and I get to meet really amazing people virtually. We can thank the pandemic for sort of entering this kind of virtual world for us. And so I've been just doing a lot of events, juggling my teaching schedule as well, but just meeting really amazing people and connecting with readers and enjoying all of it as much as I can.
Cool, yeah. How long did it take for you to write the book?
It took me a while because it actually started as my thesis in graduate school. And I was warned when I said I wanted to work on memoir that it wasn't going to be fun the whole time. But I still went forward with it. And I want to say, if I just count, I want to say maybe like 5 or 6 years total. And then the editing, of course, took a little bit longer. And then the pandemic put a hold on things because it was actually supposed to come out right before. But it was a very stop and go kind of thing because some of the moments in the book were pretty difficult to write about. And so I would have to practice a little self-care. I would have to take a break. And then I was also teaching and tenure track at that point as a professor. And so that was also very rigorous.
Yes. So we see that you journaled and documented a lot of, and just taking the time to interview your family. Did you know early on that you were going to be a writer?
I mean, that was my dream, but I didn't know if that was going to be a reality because I have journals and things from when I was a little kid. At first, it started out like Dear Diary, and then they would change into stories, and then I would keep these stories because I was so afraid to let anyone read them. But in some ways, I think maybe younger me knew, because when I was researching all of this, I found this program from high school. And they interviewed me for something, and they said, Yasmin wants to be a poet and a writer when she grows up. I don't write poetry, but somewhere maybe I knew, or I put it out in the universe, and it helped me get there.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, you're a strong writer, I'll tell you that. Ita was a strong and outspoken woman. Many in our club related her to someone in their own family. Would you say she got strength from Mama Lupe or despite her?
I would say despite her. Any which way that my Ita went, Mama Lupe was there to kind of just point out that she should be going in the opposite direction. And so Ita learned a lot of her gumption, her tenacity from going against what Mama Lupe wanted, because it wasn't always the best. Mama Lupe was not a loving mother in that aspect.
So things never changed really. I mean, as far as that was concerned. Did your relationship with Mama Lupe ever change over time?
No, in fact, she passed away when I was in middle school. So I was maybe like 10 or 11. I didn't really get to know her much. I didn't really want to get to know her, and she wasn't an easy person to get to know. But I saw how much her loss affected my Ita. So I knew the magnitude of it. I just didn't feel the same way.
So you shared being in bars and near alcohol when you were young. Have you received any negative pushback about that?
I was a little bit afraid about that, and I actually haven't. People seem more in awe that I grew up in bars, and that I find to this day a bar smells like home to me, which is a funny thing to say, but there's a nostalgia in it that I love. And so I haven't gotten any pushback from it. And, I think the other thing is I was babied. I was always a little girl in this sort of adult world. And so the adults always took care of me, and they bought me snacks, and they gave me money for the jukebox. And I would in retrospect, I would think like, what else would I want? I was the center of attention in some kind of way, even though sometimes I was just observing.
Yes, that was a whole different kind of lifestyle, I'm sure.
Yes.
Now, the relationship with your father seemed pretty tough. Were you able to salvage the relationship over time?
No, what you see in the book is what you get.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And even in writing the memoir, I was hesitant to give him the space in my book. Maybe I was being like a little rencorosa that I didn't want to give him that space, but it was necessary in telling my life in the story as well. So yeah, no, it ended in the chapter where I went to see him, and I've never heard from him since.
So he doesn't really know of your strong writing skills and all of the progress that you've made over the time that you're in your life.
I mean, he might, I don't know. I'm very public in certain ways with my social media, and I like sharing. While I do share a lot, I do keep a portion of myself for myself. But I suppose if he wanted to, he could see where I was, but I don't know. I'd like to imagine just a little bit, like, yeah, look how I turned out without you.
Uh-huh. How about the relationship with the step siblings?
I don't know anything about them either.
I see. Now, your mother began working as a custom agent early on, and you mentioned her gun, her stiff clothing, and your fear of her dying. It appears to be somewhat conflicting for you as you wrote, "Mom, the brown gatekeeper to other brown people." Can you talk a little about that?
Sure. And it's an interesting line for you to pick. So as a kid, I did not realize exactly what my mom was doing. I just knew that she went to a bridge every day. And I understood the bridge and how it worked because I would often cross with my ipa or sometimes my mom for lunch or to get groceries or something. I really didn't understand the implications of what she was doing. And as I got older and as I was writing the book and I was looking at things, I found it very interesting how, now it's CBP, at that time it was custom, how they really focus on recruiting Latina people along the border, like they go to high schools, they do heavy recruiting. And I found it interesting. Like it feels odd, right? Because maybe for my family, we're like, I think 3 generations in poor. And so we didn't have sort of an immigration story. I don't have any family in Mexico, but it's so common here for people to be first gen, second gen, and then to go work in a place where they are gatekeeping. My mom just wanted a good job. She wanted a good job with benefits to take care of us. And then as I got older, that's when I thought, wow, it's ironic. But I was in no place to judge my mother because I never needed anything. I never wanted anything. And she worked really hard so that I grew up differently than she did. So while I see the irony, I still love my mother for providing for me.
Absolutely. I think that, we have to consider a lot of what life's given us. And I think that she wanted you to have the best, and she tried her best to give it to you. And it
Absolutely.
sounds like she really did a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on colorism, about Prieta, you spoke to it when you said, "I learned to walk an interesting tightrope that many brown people face. I was always going to be brown to white people. And often darker skinned people are looked at differently." Can you say more about that? And do you speak to that specifically?
Sure. Yeah. I think the title says a lot. When I was coming up with the title, I really wanted it something that was going to just represent me and my grandma. And since Ita used to tell me "Andale Prieta," I really found like, okay, we're in the title together. And then the weight of "Andale Prieta" really sort of came to fruition after it came out, when I was getting messages from fellow Prietas or Negras sharing with me both positive and negative stories of what it meant for them. And I even got a couple messages of people like, I didn't want to read your book when I saw PRIETA because my experience with that term was negative. But reading the book helped them sort of see it differently. And there's no denying that PRIETA can be used in a very negative way. I find that it's always when it's bien PRIETA that it's negative, right? The bien in front just really changes the meaning. And I was blessed that, well, it's maybe we can consider it colorism that my Ita called me Prieta, that my sister was Güera. Both of the nicknames she gave us were out of cariño. I never felt any sort of colorism in my home. I felt it outside of my home. And so I learned the duality to the word, but I made a conscious effort to take the love, especially after my Ita passed, that she was so loving to me and would talk about how beautiful my dark hair was. And now I see what she was doing. And as a kid, I would just be like, Ay, Ita, yeah, leave me alone, you know? And so I could see how she was sort of instilling this appreciation, and she wanted me to realize how beautiful I was. And she never saw me through a Eurocentric point of view with beauty. And so I'm hoping that the book does the same thing for others, because Prietas are beautiful. We're all very beautiful. Dark hair is beautiful. Our features are beautiful. And the only reason people believe they're not is because they're looking at it through a white lens, through a Eurocentric lens. And that's a shame, but I hope people reading about how I embraced it and how I even miss being called it, you know, like if I can hear my grandma say it again, wow. But yeah, I hope it helps others.
I think it does. I think that your strength really shows. And growing up myself as a Prieta, some people, again, like you said, wanted to be something negative. And in my life, I really kind of go toward it. I really love being that. I don't care. I was out in the sun, and I'm sure you were. We were not told we couldn't be, but I do have cousins that were told they couldn't be because they were lighter skinned than I. But I'm proud of you for just being strong about it, and thank you for that. I was going to ask if you thought that the nickname was a plus or a minus, but it's obvious that it's very much a plus.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
So in chapter 31, you wrote about hunger and how Ita would say, "Tienes hambre de Dios." Would you speak to the symbolism of that chapter about eating the pews and the statues? Yes,
absolutely. First, that was one of my Ita's favorite phrases, or my favorite phrases of hers, because I found it interesting when you have the munchies, I guess, you're craving something, but you don't know what it is, and you're going from place like picando and picando, like, no, this isn't it. And so she would do the tienes hambre de Dios. And so I love that single phrase that she used to say sparked an entire story. And then within the story, after her death, I was, very angry. I was very upset. And then part of, I was angry with God and religion also, just because when we wanted to have her funeral at her church that we used to go to when I was a kid, and they refused to have us there because she wanted to be cremated. And so I was very angry at the church, and we had to go to a non-denominational church to have her mass, and it wasn't pretty, and it was just a building. So all of that just coincided and built in me. And so the story is very much about me being angry at God, and especially because my Ita was a devout Catholic, and just I felt like, why did you take her like this? Why didn't you warn us? Why did she just die in her sleep and I didn't know? And so I really wanted to show that a lot of times when people, at least for me, this is my personal view, when people are seeking solace in religion and faith, and I am very spiritual, but I'm not religious. And I think when you're seeking religion, sometimes you feel even lonelier because you're looking for an answer. You're looking for a sign that never comes. And that's how I felt at that moment, that, I'm trying to literally ingest God to make me feel better. And then nothing ever came.
That is so deep. I love that. Thank you. I am Sheila, and you have a statement in your book about Sheilas. How many Sheilas have you met?
You know what? I've met 3, but I have to admit that they were all white. I've never met a Latina Sheila. So maybe this is we're different.
Yes. Yeah. I've only met 3 myself. So that's interesting. And the 2 of them were Black.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So what's next for you? I mean, will you delve further into any of your family relationships as far as your writing, or do you think you'll go a different direction? What are you looking at?
I'm actually working on something completely different. I'm going back to my roots because I actually started as a fiction writer, and then I stumbled into memoir. And, you know, writing it was a way for me to heal as well. So I think that's why I stuck with it so much. But I'm going back to fiction. I think I'm actually working on something YA right now. And I was working on it last summer, and then my goal is to finish it this summer. It's about a girl growing up in El Paso who wants to be a rock star. And so I'm sort of, it's very music driven because I love music. And so I'm kind of making the book kind of like a soundtrack of this young girl's life.
Great. That sounds perfect. Do you have any tips for writers working on memoirs?
I think writing on memoir is like picking at a scab. You just don't let it heal. And so I want to say when it hurts, you have to lean in because that's where the truth is.
Yes. We're going into March, which is Women's History Month. Can you talk about what woman that you admire most?
Just in general or writing or?
Yeah, just in general.
You know, it sounds cliche, but I wrote an entire book about them. So I have to say it's the women in my family, because even as I was writing the book, I had all my memories, of course, but it's different when you have your memories organized into a book. And I think just seeing how much they all did for me, like all these little steps that they did, from caring for me, from pushing me, from encouraging me, sometimes discouraging me. All of these, my mom, my sister, my grandma, they all did these things so that I could be here right now. And I don't think without them, I would not be here in this place.
Wonderful. They were very strong influences, and obviously they were right on when they gave you that push. So I have had a great opportunity to meet you and to have this opportunity. So thank you so much for the book and for all you do for women, because I think this is a strong statement for women.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I loved all your questions, and this has just been a wonderful, it went by very quickly. Thank you.
Yes.
Everything.
I just had one more question, just about the fitting of the prosthesis and that sort of thing. Can you talk a little bit about that before we go? I know that's kind of a big thing, but I hope that you can talk to that.
Sure. Well, I can talk about my experience, of course, in doing it, and that I think that was one of the gems I had from working in high-end retail, that I got to help women who were struggling and you know, missing a piece of their body. And so fitting in general is very intimate. No one wants to take off their shirt in front of another woman in a dressing room with a big mirror staring at you. So I was really blessed in that people trusted me, for one, and then two, when dealing with the breast cancer survivors, sharing my ethos story always helped, because I was a little kid to them, and there I am, like 25, and they're looking at me like, what are you going to tell me about my body, my breast, the shape? And so speaking about Ita's experience, about me growing up, and it was very natural for me to see, she only had one breast, and very natural for me to see her scar, really helped. And I was blessed to be able to help these women. I don't know if I really realized it at the time. I know after each one, I would have to go sit in the back room for a little bit to sort of compose myself and process what had just happened. But I was blessed to help these women in their voyage of, I think, falling in love with their bodies again, or accepting how their bodies were going to be going forth. And I had from, this is wonderful, now I don't have to wear a sports bra when I run, when I had a woman who had a double mastectomy, to a woman who was really, really upset, not at me, but she actually walked out of the fitting and kind of threw the prosthesis. And that was hard. I went to the back room and I cried that day because I saw how hurt she was. And so as a young girl, that was a lot for me to take in, but I'm so glad that I did, because I learned so much about women and their intricacies. And it was almost kind of a carry on of the way I was with my family, and, you know, going to the bathroom, sharing a bathroom, that kind of stuff. So I hope one day there's a woman who I helped that finds my book, and I didn't name anyone or anything like that, but she remembers me and she knows that I remember them, more importantly.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, gracias, comadres. Our second interview is with Yamile Saied Mendez. Yamile is an Argentine-American, Pura Beaupre gold medal winning author of picture books, middle grade, young adult, and adult fiction. She is an inaugural Walter Dean Mayers grant recipient, a graduate of Voices of Our Nation, VONA, and has an MFA from the Vermont College of Fine Arts. Her young adult novel, Furia, was a Reese Witherspoon X Hello Sunshine YA pick, and she's a founding member of Las Musas, a collective of women and non-binary Latinx creators born and raised in Rosario, Argentina, to a family with roots from all over the world. She now lives in Utah with her Puerto Rican husband, 5 multicultural kids, 2 bilingual dogs, and 1 majestic cat. Interviewing Yamile, Comadre Jeannie Diaz. Comadre Jeannie is a member of the New York City Comadres. She is a 200-hour yoga and meditation teacher based in New York City. Her classes focus on breath work, mindfulness, body positivity, and are accessible to all. Take it away, Comadre Jeannie.
Hi, so Yamile, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
So my first question is, for those who have not read your book, can you give us a brief synopsis of the story?
Yes, Twice the Quinceañera is my first book for adult readers. And it's about Nadia, who is a powerhouse, super achieving woman. She's about to turn 30, and most important, she's about to finally get married to her longtime fiance when she finds out that he's been unfaithful for several years. So she breaks up the wedding. The problem is that her family from all over the world is coming to Utah to celebrate a wedding that is no more, and there's no refunds for the venue. So she decides to throw herself a double quinceañera for her 30th party. And it turns out that the owner of the venue is an old flame from college. He's the one that got away.
For people, actually, you say in one of your interviews that you received advice as a young writer to always write from your heart and what you know. Did this advice continue while writing Twice the Quinceañera?
Absolutely. It's the one piece of advice that I carry through all my books, no matter if I'm writing a picture book that can only be 300 words or longer fiction, 90,000 words to tell a story. I always try to, even if I didn't go through the same situations as Nadia, everything that she feels, or a lot of the feelings and emotions that she had during different situations, come from the same emotions and feelings that I have felt. So they all come from a place of authenticity. And when I can't reach that place, that's a sign for me to find out more about my character or their situation so that I can always represent it as best as I can. So yes, that's the one thing that is my compass as I'm writing, to always kind of tell the truth, even if it's fiction.
That's beautiful. So we talk a lot about Nadia, and I want to know a little bit more about Marcos, and if you could talk about his relationship with his father, because I know that's briefly talked about, but like what inspired you and what's like, how did you come up with that?
I love this question because I love talking about Nadia,
Yeah.
but Marcos is the hero of the story,
Yeah.
and he is the son of a mother from Uruguay and a dad from the US, and he is the youngest son of 3. And, you know, like stereotypic, I mean, the stereotypes exist for a reason, but many times when there's a youngest son in a Latino family, that boy is going to be super spoiled and the mom's pet, and Marcos is all of the above. And his mom passed away tragically in a car accident a few years before the story starts. And even though it's not his fault, he always felt guilty for not being closer to his parents. Marcos has a tendency of running away. He is a runner, actually, in real life, and he's a photographer as a profession, and he is taking care of the wedding venue because his sister has to be out of town, and that's the family business. So during that time that Marcos is taking care of the wedding venue, he doesn't believe in love. He's a little cynical because he's been so hurt, and he has hurt so many people in his life. But it's kind of like a coming of age for him as well, to come to terms with his negative patterns of running away from bad and good situations. And perhaps it's something that he learned from his own dad. His dad is going through Alzheimer's, so he doesn't remember a lot of the things that Marcos has done in his youth. So Marcos remembers everything. So he remembers for both of them, and he feels guilty, and he puts that wedge between him and his dad, even without realizing. And it's not until he can break through that wall and that wedge that he can heal, and that then he's able to see that he is worthy of love and that he can give love in return.
I'm happy that you got to explain that, because in the end, like him being a hero, like towards the end of me reading this, I was like, I felt like I was in a telenovela. I was like, what's gonna happen? And I didn't want to spoil the ending for everyone, but you know, now we know. I thought that was it. Yeah, it was like definitely a page turner.
And I love that you say that it's like a telenovela, because it's kind of like inevitable. I feel like, you know, again, going back to the stereotype, we feel so much as a people in our culture, and the things that happen in our families will affect every other relationship. And so, yes, even these characters who are a little stoic can be extra when they're trying to repress or express their feelings. So that's how I felt writing it too.
For sure. That actually goes into my next question. So in a lot of Latino families, all the moms and tias want to know about el novio, right? Here, Nadia is left at the altar, but instead of breaking down at the ultimate rejection, she decides to celebrate her accomplishments. And that doesn't include, you know, getting married. And this is a big deal. So Nadia is standing up to her family, forcing them to see her as an accomplished woman. Mm-hmm. Did you also see this as a big turning point in the story? Has this happened to you? Not necessarily you, but to a friend. And how do you feel about showing like the family that women don't need to stand behind men?
Oh, I love this question, because even sometimes when we have a woman who's very accomplished, I mean, Nadia is a lawyer, she is trying to make partner where she works, and she has done everything by the book. But still, she doesn't feel like she's ever going to make her parents approve of her life. There's always going to be something she has a few extra pounds. She broke up with the boyfriend the fiance that the parents love like a son, and so there's always those little thorns that she has in her heart. And so she's throwing herself this celebration because she saw an article in a magazine, and she thought, okay, this is gonna be wonderful, just an opportunity to celebrate myself. But in the process of celebrating herself, she also finds ways to celebrate the other women in her life, like her sister, and appreciate. I mean, the sister took a different path. She married very young, and she's a devoted mother and wife. And for Nadia, that was always something that she never wanted to, although that was expected of her too. She looked down on her sister for those reasons. And then she finds out things about her mom and her aunts and the grandmas that she hadn't imagined before. And so even though I didn't go through something like that, I am a believer that we come of age during different times in our lives. So we have a quinceañera for when the teenager girl is becoming a woman and going out into the world. And sometimes we believe that once you become an adult, the choices that you make are set in stone forever. But I've seen in my real life that I started writing before I turned 30. I already had 4 little kids, and I decided that I was going to be published. I had been writing for such a long time. So I didn't throw myself without quinceañera, but I decided to join a writer's group and pursue my dream. And I'm 45 now, and I have different dreams. So for my triple quinceañera this year, I said, okay, I ran a half marathon for the first time in my life. So I feel like, and in the end of the book, when the venue is starting to do other types of celebrations, they get the news that a woman is celebrating her quadruple quinceañera. So I feel like we have the opportunity. Sometimes we believe that life has to end at a certain point once you reach an age. Okay, this is it. Now I'm just gonna wait for for death, pretty much. But it doesn't have to be the case, and we can celebrate even small accomplishments that the world might not see as big things, but for us they are planting a garden or pursuing a passion that we always felt strongly about, but didn't have time for because we were raising little kids or we were working at a different job. So I think it's just, as I was writing, I was thinking about all the opportunities that we women have and the things that we can accomplish also when we support each other.
Yes. Is Nadia a feminist?
She is a feminist, and it's kind of complicated because sometimes we, in our society, we have a vision of what a feminist should look like and act like, and sometimes erroneously we think that there's no place for love in being a feminist. But being a feminist should be ultimately about a woman having the right to choose whichever life she wants to.
You've written mostly for children and teens. So how is this different, writing an adult romance novel? And is the level of difficulty the same? If not,
there's difficulties in different ways. Because when I was writing Twice the Quinceañera, Nadia and Marcos have lived in my mind for many, many years. But I sat down to finally write their story during the pandemic, when it seemed like at the worst of the pandemic, March 2020. And so it seemed like the only things that I could either read or watch on TV were romances or horror. There was no in between. And so I actually, last year when Twice the Quinceañera came out, I also had an anthology of horror stories that came out. So they, they're just the two faces of the same coin. And so Twice the Quinceañera was, when I sat down to write it every day, it was a happy moment for me. It was just opening the floodgates for a facet of being a writer that I hadn't explored before. It was fine to explore adult love and be able to use a different kind of vocabulary and explore family situations from a different point of view. But I find again that just in the same way that I approach writing with the same respect for my readers, no matter what age they are, I tend to explore the same questions in all of my stories, what family is, what does it mean to be home, and what is our role in our families, how it changes as we grow up, and what it means, what's the meaning of all of this that we call life. So it was just really fun to explore all these questions from a different point of view.
Amazing. So it's interesting. You wrote horror stories around the same time that you were writing this. Like, is that like, what are you working on now? Are you working, or you finished that, right? Is that what you said?
Yes. So that was my anthology, Our Shadows Have Claws, that I co-edited with my friend Amparo Ortiz. And they're Latina horror stories from all of Latin America. So with an amazing cast of contributors. And I'm working right now. I'm working on. I have my second romance, Love of My Life, which features Mari, one of Nadia's best friends, comes out this year in 2023 in October. And it's set in Puerto Rico, and it's all of my favorite things. It's a fated lover story that find each other through time. And the thing that you know how publishing is, comes out this year, so I wrote it last year. So right now I'm working on the third Amiga story on Stevie, and that one is a super fun story because Stevie, although she's the spontaneous friend, the wild card, she's always traveling and she's fun, she has the darkest backstory and the most hurt heart. You know how it is sometimes, the people that appear the most cheerful sometimes have the deepest sorrow. So I've just been working through trying to discover how she can heal with the help of her love interest. So I've been having a lot of fun working on that book.
That's amazing, because now you're taking the characters that were in the book and we're exploring, and then it's like a different love tale as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. So, and it's funny how each of the three amigas had that same desire. In Quinceañera, I talk about when they were teenagers, they would make a wedding binder and put like a Pinterest in physical form of the things that they wanted to do for their weddings. And so it's been really, really sweet and tender to see how each of them found their love in different ways and how different it looks from that vision that they had as kids, but it's ultimately what they needed and what they want.
I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we know, March history is Women's History Month, and that's approaching. And I just wanted to know, while you were growing up, who was like your favorite woman author? And I guess it's like two-part question, because you know, at every decade that changes, right? While you were younger, you read certain books, and as you grow up, and yeah, so if you can talk a little bit about that.
I love that. I grew up in Rosario, and so our literary canon, children literary canon, is very different from what children read here in the US. So I didn't find, because of Winn-Dixie and, you know, Brewster Abithia, all these books that kids read here when they're little, until I was already an adult. But Argentina has a very rich tradition of literature and children's writers. And most importantly, the writers that made me a reader and a writer were women who, in most cases, were also teachers, and they were writing at the peak of the military dictatorship, and whose work was banned. And in many cases, they had to either flee the country or stop writing, or their families would, you know, suffer the consequences. So 3 of them are Alma Maritano, who was from Rosario as well, Laura de Betach, who was the daughter of Russian immigrants in my province, Santa Fe. And the third one is Maria Elena Walsh. And Maria Elena Walsh wrote every single lullaby and nursery rhyme and little story that children grow up with in Argentina. And Maria Elena made songs for cleanup and to go to sleep and to have your merienda in the afternoon. And it was a super sweet thing to pass on that to my children. And it's interesting, and I always mention them because they're not known in the United States, but they're very influential in Latin America. And these women whose name the world doesn't really know, but who were so pivotal for me to become the writer that I am today. And as a teenager, and even now as a grown woman, I would be remiss if I didn't name Isabel Allende from Chile, who wrote The House of the Spirits and so many books. I just read Violeta by her that just came out last year, and that she showed me that you could write about different topics and tell perhaps a similar story, but from different characters, and learn the truth in different ways. So I always call them my literary godmothers, my madrinas.
Okay, since they're your madrinas, you have to share their names in the chat. So if you could, like, before
Yes.
you leave, if you could write their names in the chat, I would love to read some of their work.
Absolutely.
And or just, you know, send us the email so we could also spread the love of all these
Yes.
powerful women. And yeah, this was the first time I didn't even know about that book quinces. So it was just, like I said, it was like, for me, it was like a telenovela.
Yes.
I very much enjoyed reading this book, and I look forward to reading your horror stories and then the next book.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for taking the time for this interview.
Of course, I'm honored. And also, Yasmin, I wanted to say I could have listened to you the whole hour. I was so inspired by what you had to say. So thank you. I'm honored to have shared this space with you.
Thank you.
Wow. Wow, really. Two very different stories. And both of them so amazing, with so much learning. Really, you both touched my soul in different ways. Thank you. Thanks to Yasmin Ramirez and Yamile Saied Mendez and their publishers, Lee and Low Books and Kensington Publishing, for their generous donation of books to our early registrants. Thank you all as well to our interviewers, Comadres Sheila and Jeannie. You did a lovely job. We thank our audience for taking the time to join us tonight. And to those submitting questions, we'd like to thank all our volunteers also, with whom this book club and all the associated work would not happen. Mil gracias to all of you. And also remember to support our authors. Now that you've read the books and heard the interviews, maybe you'll write a review of the books on sites like Amazon, Goodreads, Barnes & Noble, and others. Those interviews carry weight with the publishers as well as with our readers. Buy books to support our authors, and if your library doesn't have a book you want to read, ask them to order it. And please attend your virtual local book club meetings, bring a friend or two. And an important note, book club is open to men and women. Latinos and non-Latinos are all welcome. And also remember that the podcasts and teleconferences are available on our YouTube channel. https://www.youtube.com/Las Comadres para las Americas/videos. Our March books are The Man Who Could Move Clouds by Ingrid Rojas Contreras and River Woman, River Demon by Jennifer Givan. Again, thank you all for your continued support of our book club and Latino literature, and join us in celebrating Las Comadres and Friends National Latino Book Club throughout the year by buying books and supporting Latino authors. Buenas noches, and always read Latino Lit. Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.